8 envelopes. That's what 20 years of marriage boiled down to. Just 8 plain white envelopes sitting on my mahogany desk. My hands were trembling so violently I couldn't even hold the letter opener. The air in the room felt thick, suffocating, like all the oxygen had been sucked out by the lie I'd been living. I looked at the family portrait hanging on the wall. Lena, my beautiful, perfect wife, and our 8 amazing children. Jace, Amara, Kai, Nova, Zion, Remy, Sage, and little Lyric. I worked 80-hour weeks for them. I built this house for them. I would have died for any one of them. But that piece of paper in front of me, it said I was a fool. I opened the first one. Jace, my firstborn. The boy I taught to throw a football. Probability of paternity, 0.00%. My stomach dropped through the floor. But I thought, maybe it's a mistake. Maybe the lab screwed up. So I opened the second one. Amara. Probability of paternity, 0.00%. Then the third, the fourth, the fifth. By the time I reached the 7th envelope, I wasn't crying, I was numb. A cold, dark rage was spreading through my veins, turning my blood to ice. Because out of 8 children, out of 8 lives I financed, loved, and raised, only one of them actually had my blood running through their veins. And when you find out who the real fathers are, you'll understand why I did what I did next. You'll understand why I didn't just divorce Lena, I destroyed her. To understand the pure, unadulterated hatred I feel right now, you have to understand the love I felt back then. We need to go back to where this entire nightmare started. The year was 2004. I was 24 years old, hungry, ambitious, and trying to carve out a piece of the world for myself in commercial real estate. That is when I met Lena. She was working the front desk at a luxury hotel downtown where I was trying to broker a massive deal. She wasn't just beautiful, she was magnetic. It was the kind of beauty that made you stop breathing for a second. When she looked at you, it felt like she was shining a spotlight on your soul, like you were the only person in the universe that mattered. We didn't date, we collided. It was fast, intense, like a high-speed car crash that you walk away from feeling invincible. 2 months in, she told me she had never felt this way about anyone. She told me she wanted a legacy. She talked about a big house, a massive family, a life that people would envy. I was young, I was in love, and I was stupid. She played into my need to be the provider, the hero, the man who could give her everything she never had. We got married just 4 months after the day we met. My friends told me to slow down. My own mother sat me down at her kitchen table, held my hand, and looked me dead in the eye. She said, "Dre, something isn't right here. You are moving too fast. You don't know her people. You don't know her past. There is a shadow behind her eyes." But I didn't listen. I was arrogant. I cut my mother off. I defended Lena. I told everyone that they were just jealous of what we had. I thought it was us against the world. Then, Jace came along. The day my first son was born changed everything for me. Standing in that delivery room, holding that little boy in my arms for the first time, seeing his tiny chest rise and fall, it broke me open. I made a solemn vow right there in that hospital. I vowed that he would never want for anything. I vowed to be the father I never had. I worked double shifts. I closed deals that seemed impossible. I barely slept. By the time Jace was 2, Lena was pregnant with Amara. We were building the American dream, brick by brick. Amara was born, my little princess. Then came Kai, my second son, 2 years later. 3 kids in 4 years. It was absolute chaos. But in my mind, it was a beautiful chaos. I remember coming home late, smelling dinner cooking, seeing 3 healthy kids wrestling on the carpet, and Lena smiling at me from the kitchen island with a glass of wine in her hand. I felt like a king. I looked at that life and I thought, I built this. This is mine. I was so proud. But because I was so busy patting myself on the back, I didn't see the cracks forming in the foundation. I didn't see that the foundation was made of sand. I ignored the fact that Jace didn't really look like me. I ignored that Amara's eyes were a piercing hazel color when both Lena and I had dark, almost black eyes. I ignored that Kai had a completely different bone structure and build than anyone in my entire family tree. Love is blind, they say. But I wasn't just blind. I was willfully ignorant. I was so desperate to believe in the perfection of my life that I refused to look at the truth staring me right in the face. I convinced myself that genetics were just funny like that. I told myself I was lucky. I didn't know that I was actually the victim of a long con that was just getting started. The years between 2005 and 2015 were what I call the golden decade, or at least that's what I called them before I knew they were a hallucination. On paper, we were the envy of everyone we knew. My real estate firm had taken off, exploding into a multi-million-dollar operation. We moved out of the starter home and into a 5,000-square-foot estate in the best school district in the state. We had the pool, the manicured lawns, the luxury SUVs in the driveway. And inside that massive house, the family just kept growing. Nova was born in 2013. Zion followed in 2015. By the time Zion arrived, we had 5 children under one roof. I was the ultimate provider. I was the man who made it all happen. I remember standing on the back patio during our 4th of July barbecue, holding a beer, watching my beautiful wife laugh with her friends while 5 beautiful children ran around the yard. My chest swelled with so much pride I thought it might burst. The neighbors would come up to me, slap me on the back, and say, "Dre, you are a lucky man. You have it all." And I believed them. I believed I was the luckiest man alive. But looking back now, with the clarity that only hatred can provide, I see the cracks. I see the moments I chose to ignore because the alternative was too terrifying to contemplate. The red flags were there. They were small at first, like tiny tears in a piece of fabric, but they were there. It started with a timeline. During those years, to pay for this empire we were building, I was traveling constantly. I was in New York, Chicago, Miami, closing deals, shaking hands, grinding myself into the dirt to keep the cash flowing. I would be gone for 2 weeks at a time. I would come home exhausted, barely able to keep my eyes open, and Lena would be there, glowing, happy to see me. We would have a passionate reunion, and then I'd be off again. But then she would tell me she was pregnant. Again and again. I remember doing the math in my head once with Nova. I had been gone for 3 weeks the month she was conceived. When I brought it up, casually, jokingly, over dinner, Lena didn't flinch. She just laughed and said, "Dre, you know your swimmers are super soldiers. You probably got me pregnant the morning you left." She kissed me on the cheek, poured me another glass of expensive scotch, and I let it go. Why wouldn't I? I was the man. I was the super soldier. It fed my ego. She knew exactly which buttons to press to keep me blind. Then there was the phone. In the early days, her phone was always on the kitchen counter. If it rang, she'd ask me to answer it. But around 2014, right before Zion was born, that changed. The phone became glued to her hand. She put a passcode on it that she wouldn't share with me. She said it was for privacy, that she was planning surprises for me or venting to her sisters about things I didn't need to see. If I walked into a room, she would flip the screen face down. If we were watching a movie, she would be texting furiously, the light from the screen reflecting in her eyes. When I asked who it was always just my mom or just the girls. And speaking of just the girls, her social life exploded. She started going out for mommy breaks 3 or 4 times a week. She joined a new gym. She started taking painting classes. She reconnected with old friends from high school. She would leave the house at 7 p.m., smelling like expensive perfume, looking like a runway model, leaving me to tuck 5 kids into bed. She'd come home at 2 a.m., flushed, happy, sometimes a little tipsy, and slip into bed beside me. I never questioned it. I told myself she deserved it. She was raising 5 kids. She needed an outlet. I was the supportive husband. I was the good guy. I remember one specific night in 2015. It was our 11th anniversary. We were at a five-star resort in Cabo, a trip that cost me 10 grand. We were at dinner, romantic candlelight, the ocean crashing nearby. She got up to go to the bathroom. She was gone for 30 minutes. 30 minutes. When she came back, her hair was slightly messed up and her lipstick was smudged. I asked her if she was okay. She said she just got sick from the seafood. She looked me in the eye, grabbed my hand, and told me she loved me more than life itself. And I believed her. I wiped a smudge from her cheek and ordered her a ginger ale, worried about her health. I didn't know that 5 minutes before that, she was likely in a bathroom stall or a hallway with a waiter or a guest or God knows who. I didn't know that the painting class was a cover for a hotel room in the city. I didn't know that the gym was the bed of a personal trainer. I was living in a fantasy world where I was the king, not realizing that I was actually the jester. These were the perfect years, the years where the trap was set, and I walked right into it, smiling the entire time. The first real crack in the mirror. The one I couldn't just polish away with expensive gifts or denial, didn't come from a fight. It didn't come from a text message. It came from a joke. A stupid, throwaway joke at a neighborhood barbecue in the summer of 2019. But to understand why that joke nearly brought me to my knees, you have to understand the situation with Kai. Kai was my third born. He was 14 years old at the time. And for 14 years, I had been engaging in the most exhausting mental gymnastics you can imagine. You see, genetics are a funny thing. Sometimes a kid looks like the mom, sometimes the dad, sometimes a mix. But Kai? Kai looked like he had been dropped off by a spaceship. I am a big man. I stand 6'3", broad-shouldered with dark, heavy features. My father was a linebacker. My grandfather was a heavyweight boxer. We are built like tanks. We have square jaws, flat noses, and deep-set eyes. And Lena? She has that same rich, dark complexion, dark eyes, and thick, curly hair. Then there was Kai. By the time he hit puberty, the differences weren't just cute quirks anymore. They were glaring anomalies that screamed at me every time he walked into the room. Kai was slim, not just skinny, but wiry, with a bone structure that was completely alien to my family tree. He had a long, narrow face. His nose was sharp and aquiline like a hawk's beak. His skin was 3 shades lighter than mine. And his hair had a texture that I couldn't explain. It was looser, wavier. I used to joke that he was the milkman's baby when he was a toddler. It was funny then. It wasn't funny anymore. So, back to the barbecue. It was a humid July afternoon. I was standing around the grill with the other dads, holding a cold beer, flipping burgers. We were watching the boys play basketball in the driveway. Jace was there, muscling his way to the hoop, and there was Kai. He was fast, agile, moving like water around the other kids. He didn't move like me. I moved with force. He moved with finesse. My neighbor, Dave, a guy I'd known for 10 years, a guy I'd watched football with, was standing next to me. He'd had a few too many beers. He was squinting at the game, watching Kai sink a three-pointer from the edge of the driveway. Dave chuckled, took a swig of his drink, and nudged me with his elbow. "Damn, Dre," he said loud enough for half the party to hear. "That boy moves like a gazelle. You move like a broke-down tractor. You sure Lena didn't take a trip to Italy 9 months before he was born? Because that kid doesn't have a drop of you in him." The group laughed. It was the standard suburban dad joke, the paternity roast. I had heard it 1,000 times before. Usually, I would laugh, clap back with a joke about his ugly dog, and move on. But this time the laughter sounded like static in my ears. The air suddenly felt very cold despite the 90-degree heat. I didn't laugh. I couldn't. I looked over at the patio where the wives were sitting. Lena was there, holding a glass of sangria. She heard the joke. I saw her reaction. She didn't roll her eyes. She didn't laugh it off.
For a split second, a fraction of a moment that I will replay in my head until the day I die, she froze. Her smile vanished. Her eyes darted toward me, wide with genuine primal fear. It was the look of a deer hearing a twig snap in the woods. Then, just as quickly as it appeared, the mask slammed back down. She threw her head back and laughed, a shrill, overly loud sound that grated against my nerves. "Oh, shut up, Dave," she yelled back. "Dre is just jealous because Kai is actually athletic." Everyone laughed again. The moment passed. The conversation moved on to football scores and lawn care. But I was still standing there, gripping my beer so hard the aluminum can was starting to buckle under my fingers. That look, that split second of terror in her eyes, it was a confession. I felt it in my gut. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling fan, spinning in the dark, listening to Lena breathing softly beside me. I felt like I was lying next to a stranger. Around 3 a.m., I got up and walked down the hallway. I went into Kai's room. He was asleep, sprawled out on his bed, the moonlight cutting across his face. I stood over him, looking at his features. I looked at his ears. My ears are attached at the lobe. Lena's ears are attached. It's a recessive trait. If both parents have it, the kid has to have it. I'd read that in a biology textbook once. I looked at Kai's ears. His lobes were free, hanging loose. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. I backed out of the room, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I went into the bathroom, locked the door, and stared at myself in the mirror. I looked at my face, then I closed my eyes and pictured Kai's face. They didn't belong in the same universe, let alone the same family tree. The seed of doubt had been planted, and it was growing fast, wrapping its vines around my heart, choking the love out of me. I knew right then and there that I couldn't live like this. I needed to know. I needed proof. But I couldn't test Kai yet. He was a minor. It was too complicated. But Jace had just turned 18.
I needed a baseline. I needed to test the foundation. If Jace, my firstborn, the boy who started it all, was mine, then maybe I was just paranoid. Maybe Kai really was just a genetic anomaly. But if Jace wasn't mine, then the entire structure of my life was built on a lie. Jace had just turned 18 a few weeks prior. He was getting ready to head off to college on a football scholarship. We were throwing him a graduation party that weekend. The house was buzzing with excitement. Relatives were flying in. The caterers were prepping. Balloons were everywhere. I was walking around with a smile plastered on my face, playing the proud father, but inside, I was screaming. I waited until 2 days before the party. Jace was in the kitchen, chugging a protein shake after our workout. He was sweaty, happy, full of life. He looked at me and said, "Thanks for everything, Dad. I know I don't say it enough, but you're the man." He fist bumped me. I almost threw up. I looked at this young man, this boy I had raised, and I felt like a traitor. But the doubt was a cancer. It was eating me alive. "Hey, Jace," I said, my voice sounding hollow in my own ears. "Before you head out, I got us those ancestry kits. You know, the ones that tell you where your ancestors came from. I thought it would be cool to see the breakdown before you leave. Maybe we're Vikings or something." I tried to keep it light, casual, just a dad doing a fun science project with his son. Jace laughed. "Sure, Pops, why not? Maybe I'm royalty." He swabbed his cheek right there at the kitchen island. He put it in the tube, sealed it, and handed it to me. "There you go, King Dre. Let me know if I'm a prince." He grabbed his keys and ran out the door to meet his friends. I stood there holding that plastic tube like it was a stick of dynamite. I mailed it off that afternoon. I paid extra for the expedited processing. I needed to know. 2 weeks passed. The graduation party came and went. It was a blur of toasts and cheers. I gave Jace a new car.
Lena cried tears of joy. We took photos. I look at those photos now and I see a dead man walking. Then the email came. I was in my office at work. It was a Tuesday morning. The subject line was innocuous. Your results are ready. I locked my office door. I turned off the lights. I sat in the dark, the glow of the monitor the only light in the room. My hand hovered over the mouse. I was sweating. Actual cold sweat was dripping down my back. I clicked the link. The page loaded slowly. A colorful pie chart appeared. African, European, a mix of regions. I scrolled down. I was looking for the paternity match. I had submitted my own sample alongside his, linked as father. I found the section. Parental lineage. I read the words. Then I read them again and again. Biological relationship. Not detected. Probability of paternity, 0.00%. The world stopped. Literally stopped. The hum of the air conditioner, the traffic outside, the beating of my own heart. It all went silent. All I could hear was a high-pitched ringing in my ears. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the computer. I just sat there. I stared at those zeros. 0.00%. Jace, my boy, the kid I taught to ride a bike, the kid whose scraped knees I bandaged, the kid I sat up all night when he had the flu. He wasn't mine. He wasn't mine. My first thought wasn't anger. It was confusion. My brain couldn't process it. How? We were married. We were happy. Jace was born 9 months after our honeymoon phase. He was pregnant when I met her. She was already pregnant. She didn't marry me for love. She married me for a cover story. She needed a father. She needed a paycheck. She needed a sucker. And I was the perfect mark. Young, ambitious, naive, and desperate to be a hero. I stood up from my desk and my legs gave out. I collapsed onto the floor of my office, gasping for air. It felt like someone had reached into my chest and ripped out my lungs. I dry heaved into the trash can until there was nothing left. I lay there on the carpet for an hour, staring at the ceiling tiles, tears streaming down my face. I cried for Jace. I cried for the 18 years of lies. I cried for the young man that I used to be, the one who thought he had found his soulmate. But as the tears dried, something else took their place. A coldness, a terrifying, absolute clarity. If Jace wasn't mine, I thought of Kai. I thought of Amara. I thought of the other 5 children waiting at home. The realization washed over me like a tidal wave of sewage. What if none of them are mine? I stood up. I wiped my face. I walked to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my skin. I looked in the mirror. The man looking back at me was different. The light in his eyes was gone. In its place was a fire. A quiet, deadly fire. I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. That would be too easy. That would be mercy, and I was fresh out of mercy. I needed to know the full extent of the infection. I needed to cut it all out. I walked back to my desk, sat down, and opened a new browser tab. I started searching for hidden cameras. I started searching for GPS trackers. I started searching for private investigators. The grieving father was dead. The vengeful ghost had taken his place.
The spiral didn't happen slowly. It was a free fall. After the Jace revelation, I didn't go home for 2 days. I told Lena I had an emergency crisis at a construction site in another state. I stayed in a cheap motel 10 miles from our house, sitting in the dark, plotting. When I finally walked back through my front door, I was an actor on a stage. I kissed Lena on the cheek, I asked the kids about school, I played the role of Dre, the loving father and husband. But inside, I was a surveillance team of 1. I started with the money. For 20 years, I had let Lena handle the household accounts. I made the money, she managed the budget. It was our arrangement. I trusted her. Now I logged into our bank accounts for the first time in a decade. I went back through years of statements, thousands of dollars in cash withdrawals, consulting fees to companies I had never heard of, wire transfers to accounts with names that meant nothing to me. Then I went to the phone bill. I downloaded the detailed call logs going back 5 years. There was a pattern. Every Tuesday and Thursday morning, like clockwork, there were calls to a specific number, 9 a.m. to 11 a.m., while the kids were at school, while I was at work. I ran the number through a reverse lookup. It belonged to a man named Marcus, her old boss from 15 years ago. I felt sick, but I needed more. I needed eyes and ears inside my own home. I bought micro cameras disguised as smoke detectors and phone chargers. I waited until Lena took the girls shopping on a Saturday, and I went to work. I installed one in the living room, one in the kitchen, and one in the master bedroom, pointed directly at the bed I had slept in for 20 years. For a week, I watched the feeds on my phone while I was at the office. I saw nothing. Just Lena cleaning, cooking, watching TV. I started to think maybe I was crazy. Maybe the Jace thing was a one-time mistake, a youthful indiscretion she was too afraid to confess. Then came Friday. I was at my desk, staring at the feed from the kitchen. Lena was on the phone. She was pacing. She looked agitated. I turned up the volume on my headphones. "He's been acting weird, Marcus. He's quiet. He's asking questions about the accounts. Do you think he knows?" Pause. She listened. "I can't just leave, you idiot. The money is here. The house is here. And what about Amara? She's asking about you again. She wants to know why her uncle doesn't visit anymore." My blood ran cold. Amara, my 16-year-old daughter, my princess. I know, Lena continued, lowering her voice. "But if he finds out about the others, God, Marcus, if he finds out about the Vegas trip or the guy from the gym, he'll kill me. He'll kill us all." The others, plural. The Vegas trip. The guy from the gym. She wasn't just talking about one affair. She was talking about a lifestyle. She was talking about a revolving door of men. I ripped the headphones off my head and threw them across the room. I felt like I couldn't breathe. My chest was tight, my vision blurring. This wasn't just infidelity. This was systematic. This was predatory. She had turned my home into a brothel and my life into a bankroll for her illegitimate children. I went back to the computer. I pulled up the deleted messages from her iCloud, which I had hacked into the night before using a recovery software. I found a thread with her sister, Kayla. Date, August 2012, around the time Nova was conceived. "Lena, I messed up, Kay. I hooked up with that coworker again, the one with the blue eyes. I think I might be pregnant." "OMG, Lena, does Dre know?" "Of course not, and he never will. Dre is traveling next week. I'll just tell him he got me right before he left. He believes anything I say. He's so desperate to be the big man, he never does the math." He never does the math. I read that sentence over and over until the words lost their meaning. I was a joke to them, a wallet with a heartbeat. I closed the laptop. I sat in silence for a long time. The sadness was gone now. The shock was gone. All that was left was a cold, calculated need for absolute truth. I wasn't just going to guess anymore. I wasn't going to wonder. I was going to test them all, every single one.
The decision wasn't made in a fit of rage. It was made in the quiet, dead center of the night. I was sitting in my car, parked down the street from my own house, watching the lights go out one by one. I looked at that sprawling mansion, bought and paid for with my sweat and blood, and I realized it wasn't a home. It was a crime scene. I knew what I had to do.
I couldn't just accuse her. She would deny it. She would gaslight me. She would turn the kids against me. I needed indisputable, scientific proof. I needed a weapon that she couldn't cry her way out of. I'm testing every single one of them, I whispered to the empty car. The words tasted like ash in my mouth. Every single one. It was a declaration of war. A war against my own past, my own memories, my own family. I knew that once I started this, there was no going back. I was about to nuke my entire life. But looking at that dark house, knowing the lies that were sleeping soundly in those beds, I knew I had no choice. I had to burn it down to save myself.
I became a phantom in my own house. Over the next week, I collected the samples. It was easier than you'd think. A hairbrush here, a used toothbrush there, a discarded soda can. I labeled each Ziploc bag with a date and a name, my hands steady, my heart cold. I drove 2 towns over to a private lab to avoid anyone recognizing me. I paid in cash. Then, the waiting began. 7 days of hell. When the envelopes finally arrived, I didn't open them immediately. I waited until everyone was out of the house. I sat at my desk, arranged them in birth order, and began the autopsy of my life. Kid number 1, Jace, 18. I already knew this one, but seeing it again on official paper didn't make it hurt less. 0% match, but this time I had done the advanced ancestry trace. The biological father wasn't a stranger. The genetic markers pointed to a 99.9% match with a man of similar ethnic background from the same small town Lynch grew up in. I remembered the best friend's son rumor. It wasn't a rumor. Jace was the son of her high school sweetheart, the bad boy she swore she was over. She had been sleeping with him the entire time we were falling in love. Kid number 2, Amara, 16. My princess. The girl who wrapped me around her finger. 0% match. The father? Marcus. Her old boss. The man I had shaken hands with at company Christmas parties. The man who had patted me on the back and told me I had a beautiful family. He had been sleeping with my wife in his office while I was closing deals to pay for her ballet lessons. Kid number 3, Kai, 14. The milkman's baby, the athlete. 0% match. The sample matched a specific genetic cluster found in Eastern Europe. I checked the dates. 9 months before Kai was born, Lena went on a girls' trip to Vegas. I found the old credit card statements, a charge for a room at the Venetian, and a charge for a VIP host service. She didn't just cheat, she had a one-night stand with a random tourist or a club promoter, got pregnant, and brought the souvenir home for me to raise. Kid number 4, Nova, my quiet, artistic girl. Surely she was mine. 0% match. I almost threw up. The biological father was a coworker from the temp job she worked for 6 months just to get out of the house. I remembered him. He was the funny guy at the office picnic, the one who always made her laugh. While I was traveling for work, he was comforting my wife. Kid number 5, Zion. 0% match. This one hurt differently. The DNA matched a man with a criminal record in the state database, a feature of the premium background check I paid for. It was her ex-boyfriend, the one who came back into town to visit his sick mother that year. She had told me she ran into him at the grocery store and they caught up for 5 minutes. Apparently 5 minutes was all it took. Kid number 6, Remy, 8. 0% match. The father? Dave, my neighbor, the guy who made the joke at the barbecue, the guy who drank my beer and watched football on my couch. While I was at work, he was walking across the street, entering my home, and sleeping with my wife. The audacity, the sheer utter disrespect. Kid number 7, Sage, 0% match. The biological father was traced to a local personal trainer. Lena had joined a boot camp that year to lose the baby weight from Zion. She lost the weight, and she gained another secret child. I paid for the gym membership. I paid for the sessions. I literally paid for her to cheat on me. Kid number 8, Lyric. My baby girl, the youngest. I held the last envelope. My hands were shaking. I prayed. I actually prayed to a God I wasn't sure I believed in anymore. Please, just one. Let me have just one. I tore it open. Probability of paternity? 99.99%. I stared at the number. I blinked. I read it again. Match. She was mine. Lyric was mine. I collapsed back in my chair, a sob ripping through my throat. 1. Out of 8, 1 was mine. But the relief was short-lived, because as I looked at that result, a sickening realization crept in. Why Lyric? Why now? Why after 7 affairs and 7 lie babies did she suddenly decide to have one with me? Then I remembered the timing. 4 years ago. That was the year I almost left. That was the year I found a text message, innocent enough, but suspicious, and I threatened divorce. I told her I was done. I packed a bag. She cried. She begged. And then a month later, she was pregnant. She didn't have Lyric because she loved me. She had Lyric as an anchor. She had a baby with me to trap me, to guilt me into staying, to secure her financial future for another 18 years. My only biological child was a pawn, a strategic move in her sick game of chess.
You would think that seeing that 99% match for Lyric would have brought me some relief. You would think that knowing I had at least one true heir, one drop of my own blood in this ocean of lies would be a life raft. But it wasn't a life raft. It was an anchor. And as I sat there staring at that piece of paper, the realization of why she existed hit me with the force of a physical blow. To understand the sickness of it, you have to go back 4 years. It was the only time in our marriage that I actually came close to walking away. It was 2021. I had found a text message on her phone. It wasn't explicit, but it was intimate. It was from a number I didn't know, wishing her a good morning, beautiful. When I confronted her, she spun a story about a wrong number, about a spam bot. But for the first time in 16 years, I didn't buy it. The blinders had slipped, just for a moment. I packed a bag. I remember the look on her face when she saw the suitcase on the bed. It wasn't sadness, it was panic. She wasn't afraid of losing me. She was afraid of losing the ATM. She was afraid of losing the mansion, the status, the cover story for her 7 other secrets. She blocked the doorway. She cried. She threw herself at my feet. She screamed that she couldn't live without me, that our family was everything. I was weak. I was tired, and I let her talk me into staying just for the weekend to talk things through. That weekend, she was a different person. She was the woman I had met in 2004. She was attentive, affectionate, seductive. She initiated intimacy for the first time in years. She told me she wanted to reconnect, to start over, to bond us together forever. And like a fool, I fell for it. 6 weeks later, she walked into the kitchen with a positive pregnancy test. She had tears in her eyes. She said, "This is a sign, Dre. This is God telling us we're meant to be together. This baby is our fresh start." I remember feeling trapped. I remember feeling a heavy weight settle in my stomach, even as I smiled and hugged her. I had been ready to leave. I had one foot out the door. And now I was locked in for another 18 years. That is what Lyric is. She isn't a child born of love. She isn't a fresh start. She is a biological weapon. Lena knew I was slipping away. She knew the doubts were creeping in. She knew she needed something powerful to chain me to this house, something I couldn't walk away from. And what is a stronger chain than a newborn baby? She calculated her cycle. She targeted me. She used my own body against me to manufacture a hostage. The other children, they were born out of her selfishness, her lust, her need for validation from other men. But Lyric? Lyric was born out of cold, hard strategy. She was a tactical decision. Lena looked at her empire of lies, saw it was threatened, and decided to secure the perimeter with a pregnancy. I looked at the photo of Lyric on my desk. She has my nose. She has my chin. She is the only one who looks like me. And I love her. God help me, I love her. But now every time I look at her, I don't just see my daughter. I see the bars of my cell. I see the desperation of a woman who was willing to bring a human life into the world just to keep her credit cards active. It makes me sick to my stomach. It makes me want to scream. She used my own blood to enslave me. She knew I would never leave a baby. She knew I was a good man, a responsible man. She weaponized my own morality against me. So here I was, 7 strangers and 1 hostage. That was my family. The paper in my hand shook as I set it down on top of the others. The puzzle was complete. The picture it formed was a landscape of pure evil. I had the truth. I had the proof. I had everything I needed to destroy her. But I wasn't done yet. Before I dropped the bomb on Lena, I had one loose end to tie up. One personal score to settle. I looked at the result for Jace again. The first envelope. The best friend's son. Ryan. Ryan was my best man. Ryan was the guy I played football with in high school. Ryan was the godfather to my children. He sat at my dinner table every Thanksgiving. He clapped me on the back when Jace was born and told me he was a fine-looking boy. He knew. For 18 years, he knew. He watched me raise his son. He watched me pay for his son's college. He watched me teach his son to shave. And he said nothing. He smiled in my face and ate my food and drank my wine, all while laughing at me behind my back. The rage that surged through me then wasn't the cold ice I felt for Lena. It was fire. White-hot, blinding fire. I wasn't going to wait for the lawyers for this one. I wasn't going to wait for the court. I grabbed my keys. I grabbed the result for Jace, and I walked out the door. I wasn't going to the police. I was going to Ryan's house, and I promised myself that only one of us was going to walk away from that conversation.
I don't remember putting the car in gear. I don't remember navigating the streets. The drive to Ryan's house was a blank space in my memory, a 15-minute void where time ceased to exist. All I know is that my hands were gripping the steering wheel so tight that my knuckles turned white, and my heart was hammering against my ribs like a sledgehammer. Ryan, my best friend, my brother, the man I had known since we were sophomores in high school. We'd played on the same defensive line. We'd gone to the same college. I was the best man at his wedding, and when he got divorced 3 years later, I was the one who let him crash on my couch for 2 months. I pulled him out of his depression. I gave him money to start his landscaping business, and he repaid me by sleeping with my wife. He repaid me by planting his seed in her womb and letting me raise the harvest. I pulled into his driveway. It was a Saturday afternoon. His truck was there. The garage door was open. I could hear music playing from inside, some classic rock station we used to listen to back in the day. The normalcy of it made me want to vomit. He was in there, probably having a beer, living his life, completely unaware that the Grim Reaper had just parked on his lawn. I didn't knock. I didn't ring the doorbell. I pounded on the front door with the side of my fist, a heavy, rhythmic thud that shook the frame. "Coming! Hold your horses!" I heard him yell from inside. The lock clicked. The door swung open, and there he was, Ryan, wearing the key shirt and gym shorts, a half-eaten sandwich in his hand. He looked at me, and a smile spread across his face. "Dre, what's up, brother? I wasn't expecting—" I didn't let him finish. I shoved him. I shoved him hard, right in the center of his chest. He stumbled back, dropping his sandwich, tripping over his own feet and crashing into the hallway table. A vase shattered on the floor. "Whoa, Dre, what the hell is wrong with you?" he shouted, scrambling to regain his balance. He looked confused. He looked innocent. That was what made me hate him the most. The mask was so perfect. I didn't say a word. I just reached into my pocket and pulled out the crumpled piece of paper, the DNA test. I threw it at him. It hit him in the face and fluttered to the floor. "Read it," I growled. My voice sounded like gravel grinding together. "Pick it up and read it." Ryan looked at me, then down at the paper. He hesitated. I saw the gears turning in his head. He saw the logo of the lab. He saw the look in my eyes. The confusion on his face started to melt away, replaced by a dawn of terrifying recognition. He slowly bent down and picked it up. His hands were shaking. He unfolded it. He read the name, Jace. He read the result, 0% paternity. He read the ancestry match. Silence. Absolute silence filled the hallway. The classic rock music was still playing in the background, singing about Sweet Home Alabama, a sick soundtrack to the destruction of a friendship. I looked up at him. His face was pale. All the color had drained out of him. He looked like a ghost. Dre, listen to me." "Is he yours?" I asked. I didn't scream. I asked it quietly, dangerously. "Is my son, is Jace, yours?" Ryan swallowed hard. He took a step back, holding his hands up in surrender. "Dre, it was a long time ago. We were young. It was before you guys were really serious. Lena said she handled it. She said, handled it? By making me raise him? She handled it by letting me name him? By letting me pay for his food, his clothes, his college? You let me make him my junior, Ryan. You stood there at the christening. You were his godfather." I took a step toward him. He backed up until he hit the wall. I didn't know for sure," Ryan stammered, tears starting to well up in his eyes. "I suspected, but she told me no. She swore it was yours. She said the dates didn't line up with us. She said it was a mistake to even worry about it. We didn't want to hurt you, Dre. We didn't want to ruin what you had." "You didn't want to hurt me?" I laughed, a cold, maniacal laugh. "You've been laughing at me for 18 years. Every time you came to my house, every time you watched the game with me, you looked at Jace and you saw your own face and you said nothing." "It was one night," he screamed. "It was one mistake. We were drunk. I tried to stop it, but—" I didn't want to hear the details. I didn't want to hear the excuses. I swung. My fist connected with his jaw with a sickening crunch. It felt good. It felt like justice. Ryan went down like a sack of bricks. But I wasn't done. I was 18 years of angry. I was on top of him before he hit the floor. I grabbed him by the collar of his t-shirt and slammed his head back against the floorboards. "You stole my life!" I screamed, punctuating every word with a punch. "You stole my son!" Ryan tried to fight back. He flailed his arms, landing a weak hit on my shoulder, but he was no match for the rage that was fueling me. I was a man possessed. I was hitting him, not just for Jace, but for every lie, every smile, every betrayal. I was hitting him for the moments he told Jace, "Listen to your father," pointing at me, knowing it was a lie. Furniture was overturning. A lamp crashed down. We were rolling around in the broken glass of the vase. I could hear him groaning, begging me to stop. Blood was pouring from his nose, splattering onto my shirt. "Dre, stop! You're gonna kill me!" he gurgled. "That's the point!" I yelled back. My hands were around his throat now. I squeezed. I watched his eyes bulge. I wanted to snuff out the light in them. I wanted to erase him from the earth. Sound of sirens in the distance, getting louder. I didn't hear the sirens at first. I didn't hear the pounding on the door. I didn't hear the neighbors screaming. "Police, open up!" The door, which was already unlatched, flew open. Strong hands grabbed me by the shoulders. I fought them. I tried to stay on him. I wasn't finished. "Get off him, now!" I was ripped away from Ryan, 2 officers pinned me against the wall. I was panting, my chest heaving, my knuckles raw and bleeding. Ryan was lying on the floor, curled into a fetal position, coughing up blood, his face a swollen mask of purple and red. He attacked me, Ryan wheezed, pointing a shaking finger at me. The officer holding me spun me around. "Calm down, sir, or you're going out in cuffs." I looked at the officer. Then I looked at Ryan. The adrenaline was starting to fade, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. "I'm calm," I said, spitting blood from a cut on my lip onto the carpet. "I'm done." The officers separated us. They took statements. Ryan, the coward that he is, didn't press charges. He knew that if this went to court, the reason for the fight would come out. He didn't want his ex-wife or his family knowing he fathered a secret child with his best friend's wife. He told the cops it was a personal dispute that got out of hand. They let me go with a warning and an order to stay away from the property. As I walked out of that house, stepping over the shattered glass, I looked back at Ryan one last time. He was sitting on the floor, holding an ice pack to his face, looking at me with terror in his eyes. "You better call her," I said, my voice low and steady. "You better call Lena and tell her I know, because I'm going home now. And what I did to you, that was just the warm-up." I walked back to my car. My shirt was torn. My hands were bloody. I looked like a madman, and maybe I was. I got in, started the engine, and turned the car towards home. The sun was setting now. The sky was a bruised purple, matching the color of Ryan's face. It was dinner time. They'd all be there. Lena, the kids, sitting around the big dining room table, eating the food I paid for, living the lie I sustained. It was time for the main event. It was time for the family meeting from hell.
I pulled into the driveway just as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, sinister shadows across the lawn of my perfect suburban home. The house was glowing warm and yellow from the inside. I could see movement in the dining room window. They were setting the table. I checked myself in the rearview mirror. My shirt was stained with Ryan's blood. My lip was swollen. My knuckles were raw. I didn't care. I grabbed the folder, the thick, heavy stack of envelopes and reports from the passenger seat. It felt heavier than a brick. It felt like a bomb. I walked to the front door and unlocked it. Laughter. That was the first thing I heard. The sound of children laughing, silverware clinking, the casual chatter of the family dinner. It made my skin crawl. I walked down the hallway, my footsteps heavy on the hardwood floor. The laughter died down as I entered the dining room. Silence. 8 pairs of eyes turned to look at me. Lena was at the head of the table, holding a serving spoon of mashed potatoes. She froze. Her eyes went to my torn shirt, then to the blood on my hands, and finally to the folder I was clutching. "Dre," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Oh my God, Dre, what happened? Were you in an accident?" The kids were staring, wide-eyed. Jay stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Dad, you okay? You're bleeding." I didn't answer. I walked to the head of the table, opposite Lena. I looked at each of them. Jace, Amara, Kai, Nova, Zion, Remy, Sage, Lyric. My beautiful, innocent, stolen children. "Sit down, Jace," I said. My voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. "Dad, you need a doctor. Sit down," I roared, slamming the folder onto the table. The plates rattled, the water glasses shook. Jace sat down. Lena was pale now. She knew. She looked at the folder, then at me, and the realization washed over her like a bucket of ice water. She dropped the serving spoon into the potatoes. "Dre, let's Let's go into the other room, please. The kids. No, I said, cutting her off. We're doing this here, as a family. I opened the folder. I took out the first document. For 18 years, I started, looking at Jace. I have loved you. I have raised you. I have been your father. Dad, what are you talking about? Jace asked, his voice cracking. I slid the paper across the mahogany table toward him. Read it. Jace looked at his mother. Lena was shaking her head, tears streaming down her face. Don't, she sobbed. Jace, don't read it. Dre, please, I'm begging you. Jace picked it up. He read it. I watched his face crumble. The confusion, the denial, the heartbreak. Not the father, he whispered. He looked up at me. Dad, what does this mean? It means, I said, pointing a bloody finger at Lena, that your mother is a liar. It means I am not your biological father. It means your real father is Ryan, my best man. A gasp went around the table. Amara covered her mouth. No, Lena screamed. That's a lie. He's lying. Am I? I pulled out the next sheet. Amara, 0% match. Your father is Marcus, Mom's old boss. I slid it to her. She burst into tears, pushing her chair back. Kai, 0%, some random guy from a Vegas trip. Nova, 0%, co-worker. Zion, 0%, ex-boyfriend. Remy, 0%, Dave from across the street. Sage, 0%, personal trainer. I was dealing them out like playing cards, like tarot cards of doom. With every name, with every paper hitting the table, the wailing in the room got louder. The kids were screaming, crying, looking at their mother with horror, looking at me with fear. Lena was sobbing uncontrollably, her head in her hands. Stop it, you're destroying them. I'm destroying them, I yelled, slamming my hand on the table. The plates rattled, the water glasses shook. You destroyed them. You built this family on a graveyard of lies. You made me live a fake life for 20 years. I picked up the last paper. And you, Lyric, I said, my voice softening just a fraction. The 4-year-old was crying, confused, terrified by the yelling. She reached her little arms out to me. Daddy. You are the only one, I said, tears finally stinging my own eyes. You are the only one who is mine. I looked at Lena. Her face was a mess of mascara and snot. Why, Lena? I asked. The question hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. She looked up. Her eyes were wild. Because I wanted a life. I wanted the house. I wanted the money. And you were always working. You were never there. I was lonely, Dre. I needed comfort. And you were so gullible. You just kept paying for everything. You wanted to be the hero so bad. I let you be one. The room went dead silent. The confession hung there, ugly and naked. Jay stood up again. He looked at his mother with pure disgust. You used him? You used us? Jace, baby, no, it's not like that. Lena tried to reach for him. Don't touch me, Jace yelled. He looked at me. Dad,
The months that followed the dinner table massacre were a blur of depositions, subpoenas, and billable hours. If you think the heartbreak was the hardest part, you've never been dragged through the American family court system. It is a machine designed to grind men into dust. But I wasn't just a man anymore. I was a man with a smoking gun, a stack of DNA results, and a lawyer who was just as angry as I was. We walked into the courtroom 6 months later. The air smelled of wood polish and stale anxiety. I sat at the plaintiff's table, my suit freshly pressed, my face stone cold. Across the aisle sat Lena. She looked different. The glamour was gone. The expensive hair extensions were gone. She looked tired, haggard, like a balloon that had slowly leaked all its air. She wouldn't look at me. She kept her eyes glued to the table, her hands twisting a tissue into shreds. Her lawyer, a shark in a cheap suit, tried every trick in the book. He didn't argue the DNA. He couldn't. The science was absolute. Instead, he argued equitable estoppel. He argued that because I had acted as their father for 18 years, because I had signed the birth certificates, I was financially on the hook for them until they were 21. He painted me as a monster who was abandoning his children on a technicality. He talked about their lifestyle, about the trauma of cutting off their financial support. He didn't talk about love. He talked about money. That's all it ever was to them. I sat there and listened to him describe me as a villain for refusing to pay for another man's sins. I felt the bile rising in my throat. But then my lawyer stood up. He didn't shout. He didn't pace. He simply laid out the timeline. He showed the text messages. He showed the travel receipts coinciding with conception dates. He showed the judge the pattern of systematic deceit. "Your Honor," my lawyer said, his voice echoing in the silent room, "this isn't a case of a stepfather stepping away. This is a case of paternity fraud. This is a case of a woman who knowingly, willfully, and maliciously deceived this man to secure financial gain. She didn't just lie once. She lied 8 times. She turned this man's life into a Ponzi scheme where the currency was his trust." The judge, an older man with wire-rimmed glasses and a face that had seen too much human misery, looked over the top of his spectacles at Lena. He looked at the 8 DNA reports spread out before him. He looked at the bank statements showing the millions I had spent over 2 decades. He cleared his throat. The sound was like a gavel strike. "In 30 years on the bench," the judge began, his voice low and grave, "I have seen the worst of humanity. I have seen abuse, neglect, and hatred, but I have never seen a deception of this magnitude." Lena flinched. Her lawyer tried to object, but the judge silenced him with a raised hand. "Mrs. Lena," the judge continued, staring directly at her, "you have perpetrated a fraud on this court and on this man. You have robbed him of the fundamental right to choose his own family. You have robbed your children of their true identities." He looked down at his notes and began to read the ruling. I held my breath. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would crack my ribs. Regarding the 7 minor and adult children proven by DNA evidence not to be the biological issue of the plaintiff, the court grants the motion for disestablishment of paternity. Mr. Dre is hereby removed from the birth certificates of Jace, Amara, Kai, Nova, Zion, Remy, and Sage. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Furthermore, the judge said, shifting his papers, "Due to the fraudulent nature of the conception and the intentional concealment of the truth, the court finds that Mr. Dre holds 0 financial responsibility for these 7 children moving forward. All requests for child support, alimony, and tuition maintenance are denied with prejudice. You, Mrs. Lena, are solely responsible for their financial upbringing along with their respective biological fathers, should you choose to identify them." Lena let out a gasp. She slumped forward, putting her head on the table. Her meal ticket had just been shredded. Finally, the judge said, shifting his papers, "Regarding the minor child, Lyric." This was it, the only thing that truly mattered. The court finds that Mrs. Lena's pattern of deceit, her moral turpitude, and her unstable lifestyle render her unfit for primary custody. It is the opinion of this court that it is in the best interest of the child to reside with the only parent who has demonstrated stability, honesty, and genuine care. He looked at me. Mr. Dre is awarded sole legal and physical custody of Lyric. Mrs. Lena is granted supervised visitation every other weekend pending a psychological evaluation. Sound of a gavel banging. Court is adjourned. I stood up. My knees felt weak, but my spirit felt lighter than air. I looked across the aisle. Lena was sobbing, loudly and ugly, clutching her lawyer's arm. She was screaming something about it not being fair, about how she couldn't afford the house, about how I was ruining her. I didn't say a word to her. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I just turned my back on the woman I had loved for half my life, picked up my briefcase, and walked toward the heavy oak doors. As I pushed them open, the sunlight from the hallway hit my face. It was bright. It was blinding. It was the first time in 20 years that I was walking into the light as a free man. I had lost 7 children. I had lost my marriage. I had lost the best years of my life. But I had Lyric, and I had the truth. But as I walked to my car, I knew this wasn't over. The court had given me justice, but I still wanted revenge. Lena was broke, yes, but she still had her reputation. She still had her sob story she was spinning to the community. She was telling people I abandoned her, that I was having a midlife crisis. She was playing the victim on social media. I checked my phone. I had a meeting scheduled with a journalist. And I had a date. A date with someone who knew Lena better than anyone. Someone who hated her for years. Her sister, Kayla.